Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and I want to offer a warm welcome, a good, happy return to the United States to Scott Ritter. Scott spent a month in Russia, and he's going to talk about all the different places that he went to, what he saw, and how he enjoyed it. So first of all, when you left the United States to go on the plane and you went to Russia, what was the time difference between Eastern time and when you landed in Russia?
Well, the first city we landed in was Novosibirsk, and I believe that the time difference is 12 hours. So we had a very long day of travel, including a layover in Istanbul, Turkey, and then another long leg into Novosibirsk, and I think we landed right around 9 o'clock at night, which would have made it about 9 in the morning here in New York, which is 27 hours after we left our home to drive to JFK to get on an airplane. So it was a long day.
So, the plane was it was a long ride. So by the time you landed, were you exhausted or were you ready to go?
Well, both. I mean, look, this was not traditional tourism, meaning that you arrive, you take some time off, get over the jet lag, relax, collect yourself, then move on in a very casual manner. We had a extraordinarily compact, tight schedule that we had committed to, and so we literally hit the ground running. We got in at 9 o'clock. We got through customs, passport, and checked into our hotel. We had an organizing dinner. One of the things we came to realize is that the Russians eat late at night, and so 10 o'clock we sat down, had a 10:30, I guess, sat down and had an organizing meal, and tucked ourselves in, knowing that we were going to be back down for breakfast at 8 a.m. and the day was going to start.
Well, so you went with your daughter. Had she been to Russia before, or was this her first time?
This was her first time to Russia, so it was just a unique experience for her from day one.
Oh, great!
She's well traveled. I mean, she spent 6 months in India as an exchange student. She's traveled on her own to Morocco, to Italy. She's traveled with me around the world when she was in high school and in college. So, it's not as though she is unfamiliar with international travel, but Russia is a very different place. And so this was an adventure for her.
So your first stop was where?
Novosibirsk. It's a city in Siberia. It's the Novosibirsk region is the heart of the Siberian part of the Russian Federation. It's Russia's third largest city. It's the fastest growing economy in Russia. It's a very vibrant, thriving urban area.
Are they Westernized? Did you see a lot of stuff there that we have in America?
They have everything we have in America and more. I mean, to give you the degree to which Russia has moved away from cash is phenomenal. Yes, you can pull out your ruble notes, but that's not how Russia operates. Russia operates using a variety of digital payment methods, the most popular of which are your credit card-like devices. They're linked to everything, and you can walking through the streets, you see these cars parked on the side of the road. They're called share rides. Now, I didn't understand what that meant until one of my hosts gave me an example. A share ride, you can go straight up to the car using your smartphone. You can rent the car on the spot. Get in the car and drive anywhere you want, park it, and then your rent is done. They have scooters. So if you're walking, and they're just parked in the open. You just walk up with your smartphone, type in, the scooter unlocks, and off you can go, riding anywhere you want. It's anybody who thinks that Russia is locked in the Stone Age or something like that. That's not the Russia I saw. It's Novosibirsk is a city that is under construction. There's a lot of foreign investment taking place. Sanctions just aren't working. That's the key thing that people need to understand. Russia's past that. We can sit here and have senators get frustrated over the fact that sanctions aren't working, and we can have Congress sit down with the Treasury Department and try and craft up new sanctions, and we can gnash our teeth and pull our hair and speak and pontificate and pound the table. Russia doesn't care. They're so past that. There's a whole world out there that Russia's dealing with right now. I think there's some regret that the West has behaved the way it did. I think many Russians enjoyed working with Western companies, with Europeans, with Americans, and I think they're hopeful that someday that may again come to pass. But the reality is, the Russians aren't going to allow their livelihood, their future, their well-being to be held hostage by the West. They've divorced from the West. They are now working with the Chinese. The Chinese are all over the place. The Indians are all over the place. Pakistanis, Iranians, you name it. If it's not European and American, it's in Russia doing business as we speak, and the business is good. There's new construction taking place. And the other important thing, too, is that, prior to the sanctions, these Russian oligarchs were basically stripping Russia's wealth and taking it out of Russia. Trillions of dollars fleeing Russia to be invested elsewhere in the world, including the West. Thanks to sanctions, that's not happening. But this money is still being made. And what's happening is that money is now being reinvested back into Russia. And so these cities like Novosibirsk are flush with money, where you used to have to go and have to compete for resources like any urban planning does here in America. Go to the mayor's office and find out how they allocate their budget. People come in with ideas, plans, they consider it, and then they give money to some. They don't give money to others. And the money they give to some is reduced because it's not an unlimited budget. The Russians, I'm not going to say they have an unlimited budget, but let's just say that the city planning people are looking for opportunities to spend the money they have. It's the opposite problem that we have in America, where we have a lot of projects and not enough money. They have a lot of money and not enough projects. They're encouraging people to come in and say, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to do. And that just struck you right off the bat, struck me that, any idea that Russia was a nation on hold, where people were unemployed, gloomy, and depressed because of the sad state of economic affairs. Nah. And the other thing that you have to realize is the purchasing power parity aspect of it. The ruble buys 4 times that than the dollar does. And what I mean by that is if you go to a Russian market, and I did this several times, and I would buy sort of a basket of goods. In the United States, you could say that would cost $30, what I purchased. I spent $6 in Russia for the equivalent. So, again, America, well, they're not making as much money as we do. We make more money. Nah, think again. Yes, if you converted their rubles into dollars, it wouldn't translate into what many Americans make. But the ruble buys a lot more in Russia, and there's a lot more to buy. The stores aren't empty, shelves aren't empty. The technology is there. Brand new cars. The Chinese make a lot of really cool cars. They make more cars than we do. I mean, we're Americans. We do this, we do that. I get it. We're good. We're all right. I'm not putting America down. The Chinese are sort of bigger, and in many cases, they're better. I saw their cars. Wow. I mean, they're right up there. The sedans that China's selling in Russia are right up there with the Mercedes that used to top the list in terms of technology, convenience, modern features. There's a big world out there. And I think this trip to Russia opened that reality to me as well, that we get so focused on America and Europe and this little circle of Western economies that we're used to using to dominate the world. And thanks to Russia standing up to us and China not backing away from Russia, the rest of the world has rallied into this new multipolar reality that is operating without American or European input. I mean, one of the saddest things that took place in Novosibirsk is when I went to this academic park where they are doing research and development. And so it's an academic city outside of Novosibirsk, and they're encouraging companies to come in. They have they have mechanisms for startups, et cetera. And they had this restaurant, and attached to it is this modern brewery, a microbrewery, like you'd see in America. I mean, you can go downtown Albany. We have a couple of microbreweries there where they have the big, you can see where they brew the beer and all this kind of stuff. And you sit down, great food, and it's an American themed restaurant. I mean, the photographs on the wall are all from old American movies. The soundtrack in the background is playing classic American rock and roll, and the menu has an American, spin to it. And everything's missing except, everything's there except the Americans. They're not there. They had built this place with an eye to Western investment. Now you would think that would be the death of this business. No, it's thriving. It's doing well. Fact is, this month in June, they're having an international microbrewery festival where they're bringing in microbrewers from around the world, except America and Europe, of course, because we've locked ourselves out. But the rest of the world is coming. They're going to have this huge festival, week long, the kind of thing that your average American would love. I mean, we like beer. We like food. We like music. We like people getting together and having a good time. That's what they're doing in Novosibirsk right now. Getting together, having a good time without us.
So that's in Siberia. When you were there, was it still cold?
Oh yeah, we landed. It was still snowing. So, in fact, I sent Marina a video of the snow coming down. So it was it was cold.
So I don't think that they have much of a growing season in Siberia, do they? For fruits and vegetables?
Well, I wouldn't say for they do, just like we do. I mean, it might be a shorter season, but if you go to the dachas and everything, and when we use the term dacha, some people think vacation home and all that. Dacha is more of a Russian phenomenon. It's just basically a place for Russians to get out of the city. It can be as big or little as you want it. Usually a small plot of land where they grow vegetables and they plant fruit trees and they go out there and get fresh air and they work. And in the dachas, they grow apples, they grow pears, they grow everything we grow. Their growing season might be a little bit shorter, but there's still a growing season. Yeah.
So
and they also, remember, Cynthia, they're modern, so they have this thing called the green. They got greenhouses. It's amazing what a greenhouse is. You build this big plastic thing, and you have a heater, and it keeps everything in, and it grows. it's just like us, Cynthia, just like us. They have the exact same things we do.
So were you still in the same time zone? And let me ask you this. How many times, there's quite a number of time zones in Russia, isn't there?
There's quite a few. Yeah.
So there's like,
14 or 15 of them. Yeah.
so did you hit every one of them?
No, 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 no. The furthest east we got was Irkutsk, which is where we went after Novosibirsk, right on Lake Baikal. And I still think there's several time zones after Irkutsk as you go into the far east regions, Vladivostok, Kamchatka, and then you get out in the parts of Russia that reach out towards Alaska and such. So we didn't get all the way out in that direction. Irkutsk was as far east as we went, but it was a fascinating. I mean, Irkutsk itself is provided a fascinating insight. You know, I studied Irkutsk in college because of the role that it played in both the development of Russian-American relations. The Irkutsk American Trading Company, you know, is how Russia got into Alaska to begin with, this whole expansion. And then during World War I, a lot of Americans don't know that we invaded Russia. And we actually put American troops into Vladivostok and to try and control the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And Irkutsk was actually the furthest west that American troops went on the railroad. So I was familiar with this history. I was familiar with the Russian Civil War, the fighting between the Red Army and the Whites, and a guy named Admiral Kolchak, famous Russian explorer, naval officer who went on to become the one of the leading commanders of the white forces that were fighting the Bolsheviks, fighting the Reds. And I'd always, you know, in studying, you're sort of a prisoner of the sources you use. So my perspectives of studying Kolchak and the whites were driven by maybe a pro-Soviet narrative, because many of the Russian sources that I relied upon were produced by the Soviets in the aftermath of the Civil War. So in Irkutsk, when I see this statue of Kolchak, the first thing out of my mind was, wow, it's weird to see a statue to a man that was so evil. And the Russians were immediately, he's not evil. He's a good man. He's a great man. And it reminded me of the reality that the communists haven't been in power for more than 30 years. And archives have been opened up and historians have delved in, and there's a complete revision of Russian historical thinking regarding that time. Very critical of the communist period of the Bolsheviks, and far more sympathetic to people like Admiral Kolchak. And I thought that was one of the things that Irkutsk, you know, hit me straight in the face, because in Novosibirsk it was really more about the economy, about sanctions. That was sort of the focus that I was taking away from it. I mean, there were many other things as well. Largest metro, you know, largest opera house in Russia, right there in Novosibirsk. You know, so there's a lot of culture there. But Irkutsk was about the history and about the re-examination of Russia's role in history, a new appreciation for the Tsar's times. You know, we were taken to Lake Baikal. It was still frozen over, so we were able to go out on a hovercraft to skim across the ice, and they took us to one of these glorious beachside vistas where we had a barbecue and traditional Russian barbecue, and you know, fish, freshly caught fish and everything. But one of the hosts was a gentleman named Alexander, and I, of course, Kazakovich, I think is his last name, but he is a Russian scientist and a Russian explorer, and he had taken an expedition from Lake Baikal, sailing up Lake Baikal into the rivers, get into the Bering Straits, go down to Alaska to retrace the exploration route taken by the Russians as they opened up a trading route with Alaska, and he documented. He produced this fantastic book. He made a movie about it, and he was our host, and here he is explaining the linkage between Irkutsk and the United States, that is a part of history I think most Americans are just unaware of. Fascinating. Irkutsk was beautiful, and I think the takeaway for me in Irkutsk is that for a guy who's been studying Russian history for 40 years, I don't know anything. There's so much more to be learned. I only hope that I have enough time on this planet to go back and do what is necessary to refamiliarize myself with this updated version of Russian history.
Now, one of the things that I saw in one of the videos that was filmed when you were there was the people of Russia knew you. They respected what you've done. You're more well known in Russia than you are in the United States. Would you agree?
Probably. I mean, look, it has, just to give you an example, this past weekend I traveled to Houston, Texas, where I spoke at a American Muslim conference about the Middle East and issues of that. And both going to Houston and coming back from Houston, I was recognized in the airport by many people who stopped, shook my hand, and thanked me. So, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not, a total unknown in the United States.
Mhm.
But in Russia, I thought I could sneak out in the morning in Novosibirsk and just and walk the streets on my own.
Mhm.
And I couldn't get 100 steps outside the hotel before somebody came up. Scott Ritter, oh, how you doing? Thank you for what you're doing. Da, 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 da. And there are a million selfies. That's an exaggeration, but there's a lot of selfies of me floating around Russia because everybody's like, "I'll take your picture." And we were joking because my Russian hosts were like, "Well, now I think you know how Leonardo DiCaprio feels when he walks around the street because people." It was surreal. We were driving through the middle of the Kalmuk steppes, and that's the area in southern Russia. It is as flat as can be, wheat fields, rye fields, nothing. And we stopped at this little mini mart in the middle of nowhere, literally the middle of nowhere. And I'm out just stretching my legs, walking, and a car drives by, stops, backs up, pulls in. The driver gets out and goes, "Scott Ritter!" It comes up and hugs me and wants the selfie taken. This happened everywhere, on the metro, restaurants, wherever I went. So it was heartening to see that that the work you and I have been doing and that I've been doing with others is so well known in Russia, and I'm grateful that they respect it.
Let me ask you this. If you and I walk down State Street in Albany, how many people in Albany would respond to you the way they did in Russia?
Oh, if on a good day, maybe one or two, but
Uh-huh.
normally no. I mean, even if people knew me, I think they would just continue walking. Yeah.
Mhm. I'm not gonna say your next leg. You tell us what you saw in the places that are most memorable.
Well, first of all, it was all memorable. So I can't sit here and say this was more memorable. This was a journey of discovery. So every place I went was new to me. To be honest, I mean, I'd never been to Novosibirsk before. Well, that's not true. I landed there briefly as a weapons inspector, but I didn't get to walk around the city. Irkutsk was new to me. St. Petersburg, I had never been there, and you have to understand that the organizers, um, this journey had sort of a double-headed mission. The first one, of course, dealt with the book, and so there were organized book events and media appearances related to the book events. And so that took up a lot of my time, going from a TV studio to a radio studio to a town hall type meeting where you have an audience that would ask questions. Any notion that Russia is populated by, a people beaten down by a oppressive government and they just sit there and they're not allowed to think. No, you should have been at my book events because they asked me questions. They held me accountable from my point of view. We had the kind of debate, dialogue, and discussion I encourage Americans to get involved in. It happened. And the other part was and this is solely because of the organizers, and it was a desire to show me Russia, to open Russia up for me, not to spoon feed me Russia, but to open Russia up for me to discover it. They took me to, all the cultural things, museums, and the people who guided us were the best. I mean, when people found out I was coming to Russia, it wasn't like they had to go out and get, some, unemployed tour guide to rush it in. The head of the museum said, I will personally take charge of this. And so it wasn't just a tour. I got the special tour everywhere we went. Victoria and I were able to see everything, ask questions. They weren't trying to shape our mind. They were saying, this is who we are. What do you think? You have questions? Talk to us. This was the fascinating aspect of it. So everywhere we went, for instance, we went to the Hermitage. We were toured around the Hermitage by the lady that runs the restoration aspect of all the art that's in there. She's the director. So when she walks through the Hermitage, it's crowded. There's people there, and she just pushes people aside, as a director does. She's in charge. This is her place. Move, move, move. Her tour guides, she'd come in and tell them, move aside, bring us in. I mean, I felt sort of bad because it made me uncomfortable. I mean, I don't like to be, but I'm just saying the reason why I brought that up is that we were given first-class treatment. We were in total access to everything, to have an opportunity to see and experience things. And so St. Petersburg was a fascinating combination of culture and history. I mean, as somebody pointed out, every stone in that city is soaked in the blood of Russian patriots, whether from the revolution or from the Second World War. Over 800 days that the city was surrounded by the Nazis, by the Germans, by the Finns, and more than 1 million people starved to death because of the war. And in this city, you can sense it. It's a city that's vibrant but in pain, if that makes any sense. It's a city that knows its history, and it's a painful history, but the people are alive in spite of this. Wonderful city, wonderful culture. Could have spent a month in St. Petersburg and still not experienced it all. But then we went to Moscow. I had been in Moscow in 1988, and yes, there are a few landmarks that stand out that are similar to the Kremlin and St. Basil's and things of that nature. But the city's just completely renovated. I mean, it's modern skyscrapers. The highways are just broad boulevards. The metro is unbelievable and continuing to expand. I think 333 stations and growing. It's just phenomenal what's happening in Moscow.
Okay, so do you think that Moscow is comparable with all its architecture and beauty to maybe Paris or Rome?
Well, I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful of the history of either Paris or Rome. Rome, especially, dating back to antiquity, Paris with many of its landmarks. What I'll say about this is Moscow is a far better maintained city than anything I've seen in the West. There's not a city in the West that is maintained as well as Moscow. It puts New York City to shame. it puts Washington, D.C. to shame. It puts every American city to shame. The, the way it's maintained, the cleanliness, the lack of garbage. I mean, in America, you sort of become immune to the fact that everywhere you look, there's just garbage strewn everywhere.
Yeah.
People throw stuff. In Moscow, in the mornings, when we landed the first time in Moscow, as we were driving in, and this was like at 3 a.m, they have literally an army of street cleaners that are out there, and they go through and they clean up the streets. They are followed by workers who sweep everything up. I mean, down to the littlest cigarette butt on the ground. So when Moscow wakes up in the morning, there it is, clean, pristine. They are, there's constant maintenance and construction taking place. Yeah, I mean, a Western journalist with bad intent can go to Moscow and go to a construction site and take pictures and photographs and publish it, and people say, "Man, that's a garbage city. Look at that, this, that, and the other thing." A construction site. So construction sites are that way, but the city itself is vibrant. It's clean, and as I said, it puts the West to shame.
The reason I mentioned Rome and Paris is because in America, Rome and Paris are destination spots. People, that's on my bucket list. I want to go there. I want to go there. But how many people in the United States say that Moscow is a destination point for them? Not many, right?
No, look, to be honest, the place that should be a destination point over Moscow would be St. Petersburg. And St. Petersburg is a city that far surpasses anything Paris or Rome can offer. And I've been to Paris and I've been to Rome. I've spent a considerable amount of time there. St. Petersburg is full of culture, history, architecture, beauty that surpasses what either Rome or Paris could offer. And if sanctions are ever lifted, I would encourage every American to go to St. Petersburg and then take the fast train to Moscow and experience Moscow. The Red Square is, of course, beautiful. Moscow's got parks, but it's also got fine dining that, again, would easily compete with the best you could get in New York City, the best you could get in Paris, the best you could get in Rome, and the convenience of the city. I've been to Paris and Rome. Believe me, my wife and I love both cities. In fact, we love Rome more. But there is nothing convenient about either Paris or Rome. Nothing convenient. It is a slog. It is a journey. It is a struggle to get from point A to point B. It's not convenient. It's labor. In Moscow, there is no struggle. The metro system takes you where you need to go quickly, cleanly, safely. It's just there. It's sort of the ideal of a urban, the urban transportation. And it's because the Russians have planned it that way. They've integrated urban transportation into every aspect of city planning.
The budget in the United States, a lot of the money goes towards the military-industrial complex. And you and I both know that the infrastructure in this country is not doing well. And I'm sure that there's a lot of money poured into the military-industrial complex in Russia, but you're saying that the infrastructure in Russia is better than it is in the United States?
I'm saying the infrastructure in Moscow, but we also have to be honest. It's very misleading. Many Russians are. The other thing I'll just say, I know we're not talking about people today, but every Russian I met was very open. Again, the idea that Russia is this brutal dictatorship where you have a cowed population that doesn't dare criticize, and they can whispers be out of fear of being arrested and thrown in jail. Oh, garbage, 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 garbage. The Russians, even the most loyal supporters of Vladimir Putin, man, they can talk your ear off about all the criticisms they have about Russia and how I mean, Russia's not perfect. I mean, I enjoyed it, and I'm telling you that Moscow was great. What the Russians will tell you is Moscow better be great, because the Russian government taxes the hell out of the rest of Russia and pours that money into Moscow. That the development spending in Moscow exceeds that of the rest of the Russian Federation put together. And so that's one of the reasons why Moscow is the way it is that they put a lot of investment into that. So it had better be good, because there's a lot of investment. There's resentment around Russia. I speak about the Moscow Metro, and it's fantastic, but they built more metro stations in Moscow last year than they did in all of Russia combined. So there's a little bit of a resentment amongst non-Moscow residents in Russia about Moscow, because they're just like, okay, yeah, you guys have made this shining city on the hill and it's remarkable, but there's the rest of Russia out here too. We'd like a little bit of that as well. It's not that they're rotting. Believe me, I told you there's a lot of investment taking place, but the reason why Moscow is what it is because there's a whole bunch of money being poured into Moscow, a whole bunch of money. But I guess that's good. It's the capital of Russia. It's a centerpiece. It's the first place most foreigners see when they come to Russia. And Russia is putting a good foot forward. I mean, Moscow looks good, but there's a reason why they put a lot of money into it, and a lot of that money, many Russians believe, could be, rather than building a whole new ring of metro stations for Russia to service the Moscow suburbs. Many people believe that they could take some of that money and, maybe build up the metro system in some of the lesser cities, Ekaterinburg, the third or fourth largest city. I think they have 10 metro stations. There's some criticism in Russia about the amount of money that's spent making Moscow look good.
So what other places did you go to that was outstanding and you want to talk about?
Again, I could talk about everything. Ekaterinburg, place where the Tsar Nicholas II and his family were killed during the Russian Revolution. But today it's one of the again, a thriving cultural and industrial city. Kazan, the beautiful city of Kazan. I mean, wow. Kazan is the capital of Tatarstan. Tatarstan is one of, together with Chechnya, a place that's given special status by the Russian government, meaning that the Russian Federation, Moscow, doesn't tax Tatarstan. So Tatarstan can take all of their wealth, and they produce a lot of oil, and pour it back into the development of their republic. And so the city of Kazan is this gleaming, shining city, beautiful city, lots of new construction, etc. And it's a model of how Christians and Muslims can peacefully coexist in harmony. And so too is Grozny, the capital of Chechnya. In 2002, it was the most bombed city in the world, the most destroyed city in the world. If you took a look at it, it was like a moonscape. Today, boom, totally rebuilt, totally from the ground up, everything rebuilt, giant buildings, giant skyline, giant mosques, and again, mosques and Orthodox churches, Muslims and Christians living together in peace and harmony. And this is in Chechnya, which was the scene of some of the most brutal fighting just literally 20 years ago, less than that even. And today, a revitalized society, a revitalized economy, a beautiful city. Volgograd. If you haven't been to Mamayev Kurgan, the hills outside of what was Stalingrad, where the Soviet army held off the Nazi advance, and you've seen the monuments they've built, the Motherland Calls, the giant statue of Mother Russia, beckoning for Russians to come from the hinterland to challenge the Nazis, to defend Russia. It's one of the most emotional experiences you could ever have, to see the statue be there on the site, under your feet, 35,000 dead, buried Russians, the scene of millions of people having died. And just, again, you don't understand what history means to these people. When the Russian people come to a place like Mamayev Kurgan, they literally see the faces of their grandparents staring down at them, holding them to account for what they do, saying, do not betray us, do not betray our memory, do not betray the sacrifice we made so that you may live. This is part of the DNA of all Russians. And in Volgograd, you experience that. I was able to go back to Votkinsk briefly. Unfortunately, because of the state of relations between the United States and Russia, Votkinsk is a very sensitive defense military, a place where sensitive defense military industry takes place. And so I wasn't allowed to go back to the factory where we had lived and worked, and we had very limited opportunities, but I was able to meet with old colleagues from the days when I was an inspector, and reminisce and things of that nature. So that was valuable. Sevastopol, the jewel of the Crimea, we were able to see that. And then we finished up in Sochi, which most Americans will recognize as where the 2014 Winter Olympics was held. Americans being Americans, if you study the history of Olympic investments, most cities that pour billions of dollars into building an Olympic venue lose money, because the Olympics are held and then they're never able to really take advantage of this new construction to create new business opportunities. And they oftentimes are left having lost a lot of money. Not Sochi. Sochi is thriving. They've turned this into this remarkable, sports, culture city that's still expanding. All those oligarchs that used to have their yachts and everything overseas, they all came to Sochi. All their yachts are parked in the water so that the West can't confiscate them, and they were building apartment buildings and reinvesting. And Sochi is just this jewel on the Black Sea. And again, I guess what I'm trying to say is every city I went to, I saw a thriving society. A thriving society. Was it perfect? No, nothing's perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. Do the Russians have a lot of problems? Yeah, just like we do. But for a nation that was hit with back-breaking sanctions, the Russian economy is doing better than the American economy. Russian employment is, full. There's no idle workers. There wasn't a city that was stagnating. Everything was being rebuilt, new construction, and the people were just marvelous, every aspect of it.
So, how was the food?
I had to leave Russia because I would die of cardiac arrest had I stayed there. The food was fantastic, and they offered it in copious quantities. Under normal circumstances, the food in Russia would be great, but when you're the guest of Russians, they every meal becomes an event, and so they just pour food on there. We had the privilege of going to several private homes to be entered, to just have dinner with them, and I always feel bad doing this. It's wonderful to meet people in their homes, in their environment, to have relaxed conversations that aren't, dominated by the artifice of society. But Russians are good hosts, and so they just put out the works. And it was funny because the one place we went where we had dinner, the lady who hosted us was a producer for a Russian media company. And the reason why she was hosting us is that night we were going to go to the roof of her apartment building where we would get the best vista of the fireworks for Victory Day. So the big fireworks celebration would play out right in front of us. But she had heard that Americans like steak. And so she had never cooked a steak before in her entire life.
Oh, wow.
She and her neighbors got together and they went off and they talked to people and they tried to pick the best possible cuts of meat, bring in and learn how to grill it and all this stuff. So it was heartwarming to watch them go through this. So we had steak and then they, of course, layered that on with all the Russian goodies. And it was just the kind of hospitality that we experienced everywhere we went.
Did you tell her if she comes to New York to go to the barn cider?
I told them all about the barn cider and all that. Many, many people have been to America. Prior to this, a lot of these people, they're well-traveled, well-educated. I want to emphasize that. Very cultured people who have been around the world. They've educated in London, educated in the United States. They've done business in Singapore. They've done business in Japan. They've done business everywhere. So it's not as though these are Russians that are sitting there saying, oh my God, I would die to get to America. They've been to America. And they love Americans. But when it comes to food, I just have to tell you right now, with the exception of steak, they think American cuisine is horrible. They think that we butchered it. We've ruined everything we touched with they say in Russia that, they're proud of their cuisine. Now, I can't say that I agree. I love Russian cuisine. I love the food that they gave us, but I'm not quite ready to throw the dumps on some good American restaurants. I know there's a few here in Albany that I'm proud of, and there's a bunch in New York City that I take people to, and everywhere I've traveled in America, there's good food. But again, I'm an American, and maybe I've just grown accustomed to, American dining, but the Russian food was good, but the Russians, they like to believe that they're better at producing.
So you went to Russia to film a documentary. I
went to Russia to sell books.
Okay.
A secondary purpose was to film a documentary.
Yeah. Okay. So the documentary, once it's edited, what's the purpose of doing the documentary?
Well, the documentary is the purpose of it is to capture the experience of this trip and use it as a vehicle to better educate Americans about the reality of Russia, to try and I call it a vaccine to the disease of Russophobia. Right now in America, the level of ignorance about Russia, about the Russian people, the Russian nation, about culture, the history, is unreal, and they accept at face value anything negative said about Russia. And so the idea would be to provide in documentary film format, an opportunity for Americans to experience what I experienced, to see what I saw, to be informed, to participate in this journey of discovery. And so that's the idea of the documentary.
So I hope that as the editing process takes place, that you will contact me and we could do shows and update everybody on how it's going.
I have no problem doing that. I've made a documentary film before. I did one about Iraq, and I know that to be done right, it takes time.
Right.
This process can't be rushed. But I can say that our goal is to have a film ready within a year, and that's a very optimistic production schedule. And like any optimistic production schedule, it may slide, but our goal is by this time next year in June of 2024 to have a film out and available to be used to better inform the American people about the reality of Russia, so that as they head to the polls in November, they won't allow their judgment to be clouded by misinformation and mistruths, by prejudice, by anti-Russian propaganda.
Well, I believe that the stuff that we hear on American TV, we've been hearing it for quite a while. Do you think a 2-hour documentary, or how long it's going to be, can change enough people's minds to be a little open-minded?
I hope so.
Okay.
Films, if done properly, can have an astounding impact on perceptions. And if this film is done properly, and then if we can get it shown to enough people, and as part of a process that also perhaps has me able to talk to an audience and to discuss this film and create a forum for more debate, discussion, and dialogue, I think you could have an impact, a definite impact.
And are you still thinking of having that million-person march?
Oh yeah, no, June 2024. In America, our goal is to get as many people on the streets as possible to demonstrate in favor of nuclear disarmament, arms control, and no more nuclear weapons. Yeah.
So you have a lot of work to do, and I'm right there with you, trying to get your message out as good as I can. So you've been listening to Scott Ritter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And Scott, welcome home.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
Okay.